What will you like today? Another Cloud 2 classic?
I'll stick with the usual. Maybe take a little bit off the sides.
Oh, that's fresh.
The HyperX Cloud 2 Wireless. Legendary comfort goes wireless.
Hey, watch your head.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to week 3 of the NECC Hearthstone matches tonight. It is Frosty, joined tonight with Mick. How are you doing today?
I'm making it, man. I can't complain. Life is rolling.
Absolutely love to hear that. Tonight, our two players that we will be seeing facing off are going to be Fluffy Boy and Rowan Column. It's going to be a very interesting match tonight. Mick, do you have anything that you're excited to see for these two players?
I'm excited to see these decks in general, if I'm being completely honest.
What about these decks in particular?
I mean, these overall, I mean, looking at these guys right now, haven't seen too much of what's going on here. I mean, we see super unique deck archetypes. I'll give them that. I mean, in terms of bans, we did get the most kind of run-of-the-mill decks banned and got them out of the way. You know, we got Token Druid, which is super cheap to craft, you know, really easy to make. So a lot of people are going to be running that with how strong it is. But we did see Fluffy Boy banning God's Voice Warrior that he has going on here, which we were kind of discussing about, which has a lot of win conditions. You know, it's kind of stalling the game out, trying to get those draws in with a Wrench Caliber, kind of like a bomb, but also with a Deathwing and a Galakron and all kinds of deals going on. But overall, you know, looking at the rest of these decks, we see your run-of-the-mill Hunter going on here, you know, managing what you can. Run-of-the-mill Demon Hunter, which is always just going to be face, but with a little bit of Soul Fragments thrown in there. Besides that, though, we do have 2 paladins in this matchup, but not the kind of paladin that we're thinking, which is odd. We've seen a lot of ramp paladin.
Yeah.
We've seen a lot of, pure paladin. We've seen a lot of both of those because they're super strong. But, the 2 we're looking at right now is looking like a corrupt paladin and a murloc paladin. So lots of variety going on here. Super excited to see what these guys can do with it because, overall, haven't seen much of this at all. So I'm excited to see what these guys can manage with it.
Absolutely. I was taking a quick look at the corrupt paladin. I was trying to figure out what dark deck archetype that really went into because it had this feel of like a kind of back heavy duel kind of deck, but it doesn't have anything to cheat out cards like that. So yeah, a corrupt paladin with Yashiraj. It's going to be very interesting if you can pull that off. Maybe late game having a nice swing turn if it comes down to it. But yeah, at the moment we're just waiting for our players to get up and ready, so we can get this show on the road.
And in the meantime, another thing to mention is that we've seen a priest ban tonight already.
Oh yeah.
But thankfully this time around, even though I hate going up against priests up in ladder and things like that, on the competitive stage is a totally different story because you have to draw that match out. You're forced into it unless you ban it. So with Fluffy Boy opting to go ahead and ban the warrior, he still has a pretty long drawing game because we see that Rowan here, God's Voice, he's running 2 slower decks and then 2 quicker decks. With the quicker decks obviously being Murloc Paladin because it's just a lot of quick draws. And then you got Totem Shaman as well. So with that, we're going to see a lot of variety here in terms of what God's Voice is running. But when it comes down to Fluffy Boy, everything seems to be pretty run-the-mill in terms of archetypes with those other decks going on. So like with Druid, which got banned, Token, Aggro, Paladin, that's the unique part. But Hunter and Demon Hunter still hold home into kind of what their whole archetype runs into, both very, aggro as the Hunter name usually goes for. So overall, I'm excited to see which ones they choose first, because overall, as the game kind of goes, these players are going to be forced to play all 3 decks eventually if it goes back and forth long enough. So interesting to see how these players can kind of interact and utilize these decks against each other, because say, for example, Hunter or Demon Hunter gets matched up against this Priest. With Priest having so much heals and constantly finding ways to do that, if Rowan can go ahead, or God's Voice, if he can go ahead and get those decks out of the way and make Priest his last one, he's looking pretty comfortable. He's probably gonna be looking to get rid of these aggro decks up front because they're so kind of iffy. You want to make sure to get those mulligans off, and you want to go ahead and get the right cards in hand so you can get some kind of curve going. But overall, lots of gambles looking right here. But overall, we are getting here into the first match, so anything's possible at this point.
Absolutely, and it looks like our players have gotten into the match, so we will be loading in shortly. But yeah, it's going to be a very interesting game tonight. It's going to be very interesting. Who's going to be at the bottom?
We had a little bit of disconnection at the very beginning there, but looking like right now it's ironing out for us.
Absolutely. But it looks like we are going to be getting things settled. Okay. Yep. No, I loaded in. And yes, it looks like games come off a little bit of the start. We're going to be having Murloc Paladin versus Secret Hunter. Make first reactions. How do you think this is going to go down?
I think when it comes down to it, looks how much of these secrets Hunter can get off. Looking at his hand right now, he doesn't have too many to work with. But overall, looking at Paladin and with Murloc and how much aggression and overwhelmingness you can put onto the board, with that Tinger that Fluffy Boy just drew, that's obviously going to help retaliate with this. But with such a strong start from God's Voice and having, that Angler Rod in hand and things that he likes to trade, I think overall, and as the game rolls out, he kind of has an upper hand here. Issue is, if Hunter can find an explosive trap or something like that to shut that down, that's going to be most of his hand utilized right then and there, because Murlocs are so cheap. Their health is so low, it allows easy trades for that.
Absolutely. So much damage coming out early. That's going to be 8 attack on that Tidecaller. We'll see where he places it. He trades in the buff first before going face. Just want to make sure that that's out of the way in case this were something more worrisome. But Explosive Trap does come out, and he does land 7 on the face, but having to give up his full board.
Yeah, that's huge, because especially when we see that he has a Cold Light Seer in hand for God's Voice, I mean, that's huge for him. He could have played that. He had the mana to establish himself on board, get a little bit more health on these minions, force those trades there, but overall, he didn't seem to opt for that. He seemed to go, the very damage-hungry route, trying to get that damage on board. Sadly, not getting it off because Hunter got the upfront Explosive Trap. But at this stage in the game, he only has 1 left. So if God's Voice can find a way to pull out some more Paladins, or not Paladins, Murlocs, by some manner, I mean, it could look a lot better for him. But so far, that's a huge issue on his behalf.
He's going to need to be getting really lucky with this Angling Rod here, as the 7-2 is tagged out. Sorry, both of those 1/1s being able to take him down, as a board of 3/3s. Well, not full board, but 4 minions out of nowhere on turn 4.
Pretty close, especially Wolpertingers, with the buff going on both of them, and that's huge for him. Especially those are such good hits right there for him to be able to establish that. I mean, this is exactly what Fluffy Boy is looking for, especially after he just drowned out and completely wiped God Voice's half. I mean, this is what this man was exactly asking for, because he could have pulled a Face Stalker with that, but he already got Bowtingers out of the way, and he just has a bunch of small stats instead of one bigger.
Oh yeah, we all joke about the 4 mana 7/7, but 4 mana pulling out. Sorry, that was 2 mana. That was 12 worth of stats on the board. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Face Stalker activating a Freezing Trap. Not sure how well that's going to be. Maybe later on it's going to be good, but at the moment, God's Voice is on the ropes.
Yeah, he has barely anything to work with here. He doesn't have too much synergy working in his hand right now. He doesn't have enough mana to play with as of right now. And even if he does, Fluffy Boy has so much stats on the board right now that overall he's going to have to find something to work with. And at this stage in the game, I don't know if there's exactly too much he can work with.
He's got 1 more use of Angling Rod and a Fish Flinger in hand. Sorry. So he does have very little to work with, but he does have it. It's there. It's definitely, if he is lucky enough, he can pull something out of this.
Yeah, and that's a huge, mistake in rear view, looking at God's Voice, going for that face, getting that Explosive Trap triggered. You might be looking at early trades when it comes to Hunter, because, he doesn't run too many spells, like direct damaging spells at that, and it's usually just secrets that are going to be triggered. So you much rather have, in terms of those trades, getting, say, a Freezing Trap off and get the Battle Cry effect on a minion off once again, or something the likes of that. But instead, he just opted to go straight for face, get that Explosive Trap triggered, and then allowed Hunter to totally flip the board, have establishment, and especially when Murlocs don't have any taunts in their pool, he's not going to have anything to work with.
Yep, and it looks like end of turn, a little bit of lag here and there, but I feel like this turn Fluffy Boy is going to be ending things off.
He has more than enough damage to do it.
And end of round 1.
That's an issue. I think God's Voice going forward, if he can't even beat this Secret Hunter, which is probably his easiest matchup for this Murloc Paladin, he's going to have a rough time going forward. I mean, he could get the rest of those decks off a little more easily, I'll say, a Priest and Totem Shaman, but he doesn't have as much to work with because he has to finish and he has to get all 3 decks completed in order to win a series. And if he's going to have to go back to that Murloc Paladin, at this point, I mean, Fluffy Boy's completely compromised you at this time. I mean, he exactly knows what you're going for. He knows what you have. And he knows that you don't have any taunts. You have no way to stop him from dealing that damage. You have no way to recover that damage in any kind of way. So overall, I mean, this isn't looking too good for him up front.
Absolutely, it's going to be very interesting to see what he pulls out there, see if he can come back. But right now, we are going to be seeing Corrupt Paladin versus Totem Shaman. Totem Shaman, I feel like it's very interesting. I feel like it's very hit or miss. for me personally.
Which, I mean, that's how most aggressive decks are when you really break it down. You're hoping for those mulligans. You're hoping to get that perfect curve going on. I mean, I'm sure if God's Voice had an evil totem in hand or something the likes of that he could have, replicated the next turn, that would have been awesome for him. But he doesn't have that option because, you want more resource generation. You want more little toys to play with overall. But if you don't get those options up front, you're kind of just scrapping together something until you can get a board. And at that point, I mean, Paladin usually has an answer for it.
Oh yeah, 100%. And at this point, getting the Spell Totem, I would say Spell Totem is one of the best random drops that's available in the basic totem pool. I would say tied with the Taunt, I would say that it's about one of the better ones to get. What do you say about that?
I mean, I completely agree with you. I love the Spell Totem because, I mean, looking at totems overall, and especially these deck archetypes you're trying to play with, you have a lot of spells which are trying to buff damage and things of the likes of that. And when you don't have, too many options to work with, especially when you're working on that Bloodlust right there, which we see that God's Voice has one in hand, that's your main damage dealer. So overall, you're not looking mostly for damage like something like a Volcanic Totem. You're looking for these 2 healths. You're looking for things that he can hopefully hold on to. But not looking like he's going to hold on to this Bloodlust. Getting only 7 damage out of it?
I'm confused. For one thing, using both his coin and a Lightning Bloom to get out a Bloodlust that just clears a minion and gets 4 damage to face. Yeah, that's a creative play, to be frank. That is quite the imaginative use of those cards.
I mean, yeah, I'm totally with you. Like that, I'm kind of at a loss of words, but I'm gonna have to manage what I can. Being in the position we're in as casters, talking about what he could have been looking at right there. I understand the board clear. That's totally fair. But especially when you're looking at a 2/3, which gives you another minion in hand, I don't think you want to be looking at trading out minions right there because you're going to have more resources to replace it later on in the game. Meanwhile, you're utilizing your one trump card, your win condition right there, which is Bloodlust, +3 tied to all your minions. You're trying to usually flood the board in those situations, but when you only have one minion that's getting damage onto the hero, it seems kind of pointless.
Yeah, I would say so. It's throwing away a win condition like that, just for a little bit of chip damage. I personally think there's some place he could have done that might have been better. Very unlucky Trick Totem, by the way, giving him 2 1/1s in his hand. Not the worst thing that could have happened, but definitely it's up there on how bad a Trick Totem can get. He does have his second Bloodlust in hand, and fortunately for us, he doesn't have any more Lightning Blooms to use to get the Bloodlust out. But it does appear that he uses his Volcano Splitting Axe to get some nice 1/1 Searing Totems on the board. Just get a little bit more of board presence.
I mean, that's exactly what you're looking for. We now see him actually building a board to Bloodlust because he already has that second copy in hand, which usually in a situation that's really lucky. I mean, I'll sit there, I've played Totem Shaman before, and there'll be times where I don't draw either one of them, and I'm just trying to manage with a bunch of 1/1s on board or 0/2s. But it's interesting he opted for duplicating all the totems when they were only at their base stats. Like, I understand it if you're going for a Bloodlust next round, which even then he doesn't have lethal just yet. He has let's see, he has a good bit of damage on the board. Maybe with the axe, he'd be cutting it just a tiny bit short. But with that replicating, I mean, overall, if he doesn't have 8 mana to give the Bloodlust replication off.
He's still going to be on 10 health, I believe he's going to be. But he's very much alive. And with Amber Watcher in hand, that's it's gonna be very rough for the God's Voice to come back from this one.
Because we see, with the minions right here, we got 10, 14, 18, 21. So he's going to have 5 health left. But
Yes.
he does have an Amber Washer in hand, which is a huge heal for him, which he gave to him when he killed.
When he traded the Murloc in earlier with his other Bloodlust. Yeah.
Exactly, into the other red scale. So he kind of set himself up there to, he's going to use his win condition to once again trade into a minion, give Fluffy Boy a resource to shut down his next win condition. So, overall, questionable plays all around. He may be looking for trades here, but at that point, I mean, Paladin in this stage will only be playing about 1 or 2 cards per turn because everything's going to get a little more expensive, but overall, still seems like it'd be enough.
The only thing more interesting than that is to just not attack on your turn after using. Did he disconnect? Do we know if God's voice is no longer with us?
That's what it's looking like currently, because I can tell that we're probably both looking at a reconnect screen right now, but it seems to be as if it's gone now and Fluffy Boy's playing out his turn here.
Ouch. Can I say ouch for the God's voice? Using a Bloodlust there and disconnecting and not able to attack instead of getting Fluffy Boy down to 5 HP.
Yeah, because I mean, when you're in that situation and you allow him to get no health off and you just play a Truth Seeker, I mean, obviously he has a taunt now. If he had another Bloodlust, well, I mean, which he doesn't at this point, you've used both copies at this time. You're working with relatively nothing. He's going to have to trade into that 4/6 in order to open up the board, but there's no way he can do that. I mean, he does have this Totemic Surge, but he's getting rid of so many minions in order to do this.
Yeah, he is. I sort of feel bad, and I'm gonna say I feel bad because of him not able to use his Bloodlust that early. Very unfortunate, very interesting trades going on here with the minions after using
I mean, looking at it, he did have those trading opportunities. Fluffy Boy did, but when God's Voice didn't capitalize on that Bloodlust, I mean, that was huge. He does have a board now, and if he could get a Bloodlust off at this point, I mean, that'd be great. But overall, he just doesn't have any resources now. He's not working with much. We now see Fluffy Boy throwing an 8/8 down, and we see him throwing a 6/6 taunt. So, I mean, it seems like God's Voice is getting dried out here. Has nothing left at this time besides an evil totem, which he could have appreciated more earlier in the game to get a little more resources, maybe get a kobold lackey or something the likes there. But I mean, this man is just run dry at this point. I mean, looking at previous plays, if he sat there and went for damage on the face with the Bloodlust, I mean, that would have probably pressured Fluffy Boy into saying, okay, maybe I need to trade out, because he could have these Totemic Surges in order to give a little more attack to these guys. But I mean, looking at the plays he did, he could have had that lethal that next turn. Say if Fluffy Boy was put in a situation with 5 or 10 mana, or 5 or 10 health, excuse me, but overall just not being able to follow up with that.
And a missed lethal opportunity coming in from Fluffy Boy and playing Fleet Hoof Pearl Tusk to clear the taunt and just going face with Plagued Proto Drake. It's going to be Torrent. Huge play. Huge, very lucky play. Lucky draw, I should say, from God's Voice. Not great hands. Not a great hand. Yeah, I think, don't think he's... Yeah, I don't think he survives this one.
Yeah, safe to put this one in the books, I gotta say. I mean, the man has nothing to work with at this point. Meanwhile, Fluffy Boy has 12 damage on the board.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he has plenty of heals. He has 2 Libram of Wisdoms. Looks like he's just gonna pop these for the heck of it.
Oh, yeah.
But,
absolutely.
I mean, besides that, I mean, when you got 0 cost spells, why why not? You know
Why
what
not?
I'm saying? It's like,
Why
heck, what the heck with it.
Yeah,
But-
just like a Spirit Blossom. It's got 0 mana, just throw it out, you know?
Yeah.
Just, so yeah, very interesting match too. What are you thinking personally that, that both of these players need to keep in mind as we move into match 3?
I'm thinking, you know, overall, God's Voice, he needs to be looking at just trying to put himself on the board. Overall, I mean, I'm not going to try and blame anything on connection because, I mean, we don't know what situation these guys are in, but overall, we're looking at, you know, just looking at the game, we need to, from a Totem Shaman perspective, if he tries and plays that again, and even a Paladin perspective, if you're going to be going aggro, you need to be looking at your resources. You need to be looking at what the opponent theoretically has. I mean, when you're playing on PC, you could have a deck tracker looking at those secrets, or either playing on mobile. So, I mean, I'm not sure what the situation is here, but overall, making it hard to kind of play out. But, I mean, when you're playing an aggro deck, you need to put yourself on the board. And I don't feel like these guys are establishing themselves enough on board before following through with these actions. Meanwhile, you know, Fluffy Boy doing a great job with it, but I think that's only because God's Voice isn't trading him, putting him in a situation where he needs to reestablish himself.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it looks like we are going to be seeing the Murloc's return out of God's Voice.
And that will be the case against the Demon Hunter. And, you know, with Demon Hunter, we don't really see too much variety with this deck. We see the same old every single time. Demon Hunter, I mean, you'll see a Demon Hunter every occasion, you know, with these big cards, these big demons to play up against.
Oh, yeah.
But besides that, I mean, it's such a rare occasion, and it's such a niche kind of deck that you play more for the fun of it rather than actually in a competitive setting. So, you know, being in this situation, overall, Demon Hunter doesn't have very many minions to play with. He's very face-oriented. He's very, you know, self-damage, utilizing your hero to attack the other one. So, I mean, God's Voice definitely has a chance in this kind of matchup if he can get the minions on board and try and find a way to out-tempo and find more minions to trade into so he can sit there and out-trade more damage per turn than Fluffy Boy does. I mean, you can only get so much damage on your face onto theirs because that damage goes away after the turn. Meanwhile, if you can find yourself some minions on board to really stick and, you know, trade out more and more damage as the course of the game goes on, he could have a theoretical win in this situation.
It looks like we're going to be seeing a relentless pursuit take out that Tide Collar. Very nice. Not throwing away any damage to your face, being able to clear that threat that could grow into a big problem, knowing the gods, having previously played against the God Voices Murloc deck, knowing that those Tide Collars are going to grow much faster than you're ready for.
Yeah, because especially with how cheap the card is, you go into the next turn knowing how cheap Murlocs are as a whole, you need to go ahead and get that out of the way because it's going to ramp up pretty quickly. I mean, theoretically, if you have 2 Grimscale Oracles in hand like he does, which he's throwing out immediately, not able to get any damage buffs off of them, oddly enough, with that, I mean, that could have been a lot of ramp for that last thing that he had on board, for, you know, that Murloc Tide Collar. That could have been another, say, with those 2 buffs going on, that would have been a 5 plus the 2, that would have been 7 damage on the board. But, I mean, he's throwing out these Oracles now instead of, you know, earlier, or saving them when he has a more established board. Maybe, say, if he can get a Tip the Scales out, which would be astronomical for him. But
absolutely,
you just got to be scared and looking out for trying not to get shut out so quickly, because now we got a Throw Glaive by Fluffy Boy, which I think just shuts down Murlocs as a whole.
Oh yes, I believe I can safely say Throw Glaive against Murlocs. I would say that this is pretty much, it's going to be an uphill battle and a half for the God's Voice here to come back. But you know what? I believe he can do it. I believe that there's definitely a chance for him.
He's got stats on the board. That's a good pull for him.
Very nice. Looks like he's trading in the 1/1.
And from our situation, that probably wouldn't be, you know, if you don't have the benefit of the doubt like we do to actually go on board and know what these guys are dealing with in hand. You know, if you don't know there's a Throw Glaive there, I usually would probably just want to go face there. But thankfully, knowing that you can get that damage off before the throw glaive comes in and you're going to get that minion killed anyways, I think it's pretty optimal to run that and go ahead and get that trade in. So, I mean, good play by him, whether or not he knew it. The most optimal choice overall to get that minion off the board. But, you know, we're going to see 2 minions go off the board right here with a trade. And overall, we're going to see these guys try and maintain themselves as best as possible. Fluffy Boy looking like he's in a much better situation, having more damage per turn right now. And with God's Voice just not finding a real way to retaliate because he has a lot of expensive minions in hand. Not too much synergy going on and not too many cheap draws to work with right now, which is kind of a huge hindrance for him running a Murloc deck, and that's what you're relying on.
It looks like he's going to be using a lot of his clears, the throw glaive on just the 1 minion and tempoing out the shard shatter mystic. Things are looking a little bit better if you're in God's Voice's position, knowing that he's thrown away so many of these options for clearing your board.
Which, I mean, as you said, you know, Shard Shatter being a huge board clear overall. I mean, that plays a huge part, deals 3 damage to all other minions on the board. I mean, that's almost for any other kind, especially against Murloc Paladin, that's usually like a board clear against most aggro matchups. I mean, that's usually what you want to do after they get a full board. You can wait it out a turn or two, say, all right, I can take this damage. I'm a Demon Hunter. I got lifesteal somewhere to deal with. So you can sit there, wait out those turns, and then pop that down on almost a full board, like say something after a tip the scales when he's going to use all of his mana to fill the board. You can shut that down for a